As one of the most successful TV shows in history, it's no surprise that the sequel to Squid Game has become one of the most highly anticipated titles for audiences in 2024. After being the sole survivor of 6 deadly challenges, the main character Gi-hun, now with his hair dyed red, made a bold decision to sign up and return to the island, directly confronting those who created the Squid Game. Will this new journey of his be as exciting as the first season? Or will it be a step backward for this hit franchise? Let's find out together in today's video. Note, I'll do my best not to spoil any major plot points, but it's hard to avoid revealing some details. So please consider this before you continue watching. Picking up right after the phone call in episode 9 of the first season, Squid Game Season 2 doesn't rush to throw Gi-hun back into the game. Instead, he's actually denied entry by the leader. With no leads and no evidence, Gi-hun embarks on a search that lasts for 2 whole years. On the other side, police officer Gi-hun, just as viewers predicted, was saved and has also spent all his time trying to track down the nameless island. So both of them end up giving up their personal lives to uncover the truth. First, Gi-hun and Gi-hun's desire to return to the game brings us to a pretty obvious issue. That is, the amount of screen time the show has to spend on the protagonists preparing and tracking down the organization's whereabouts. Unlike the first season, where it only took half an episode to get all 456 players into the red light, green light room, Squid Game 2 spends the entire first 2 hours just to bring the audience to the main challenge. Of course, this makes sense since the masked leader is already aware of and watching Gi-hun's every move. However, it must be admitted that the show has a rather lengthy introduction. On top of that, the plot drags on and includes some unnecessary details. For example, there's a segment that recounts a day in the life of the man in the suit who goes around challenging people to slap games. Even though this is indeed an interesting character, the scene where he wanders around handing out bread and lottery tickets doesn't really add much to the story. And we don't really need to hear him go on about his ideals either. Especially since the season has been shortened to just 7 episodes and there are so many things that need to be resolved in part 2, starting off slowly isn't really a sensible move. Fortunately, once the games begin, the series' signature tense atmosphere is recreated quite well. I'm not going to compare the games in Season 2 to those in Season 1, because that really depends on each viewer's personal taste. But overall, both the pentathlon challenge and the team elimination game are pretty creative and sufficiently difficult. They still manage to create those situations where teammates become enemies, where even the smallest mistake can cost you your life. Squid Game also maintains its signature aesthetic with settings inspired by the liminal space style, spaces that feel somewhat surreal, evoking a sense of emptiness and unease. The bright, vibrant colors of the costumes perfectly contrast with the bloodiness of the games, creating a haunting dystopian world. The only thing is, there aren't that many games. There are only 3 challenges in total, and since the red light, green light game is taken from the original season, it feels a bit underwhelming. This is once again a result of having fewer episodes and spending too much time on the initial setup. The appeal of each challenge also depends heavily on the participants. Take the first season, for example. The marble game in episode 6 was designed to be very simple, but its intensity came from us worrying about the characters we cared about. In the second season, with a much larger number of players, I personally think the show has enough memorable characters, but there are also quite a few forgettable ones. The ones who win over the audience the most are definitely Gi-hun's close friends. We see the return of his childhood buddy Chong-bi, the fried chicken shop owner, the transgender soldier Han-ju, and the mother-daughter duo, who I personally think are compelling and well-developed. In particular, the soldier Han-ju stands out the most with a story that's easy to empathize with, clear motivations, and essential skills that play a crucial role in the final act. On the other hand, we have Jun-hae, a pregnant woman who comes across as rather bland. The artist Kyung-suk, who is trying to earn money to treat his daughter's illness, is just as forgettable. Or the sniper No-yul, and I have to be a bit harsh here, really didn't need to appear in this part at all. Her storyline and the organ trafficking gang feel like they were copied straight from the first installment, and it doesn't even go anywhere. On the other side, the rapper Thanos, played by Big Bang star T.O.P., can hardly be called a dangerous character either. As soon as he entered the game, he got beaten up badly, and most of the crazy actions came from those red and blue pills. He showed up by chance and left just as unsurprisingly. Personally, I preferred the snake-faced gangster Deok-soo from the first season, since he didn't have to try hard to act tough and honestly stirred up the whole game back then. There are still plenty of other names, but overall, the characters in Season 2 are at quite a disadvantage since Netflix clearly intends to save room for their development in the already wrapped third season. So, if you're hoping for characters like Sang-woo, Ali, or the North Korean girl Sae Byok, who brought many viewers to tears, you're likely to be disappointed. Because for many of these characters, they've only made it halfway through their journey. Of course, I don't agree with using the excuse of saving character development for the next season as a reason for half-baked storytelling. But if I had to find something to cut the show some slack for, it would be that it still manages to convey, at least to some extent, messages about inequality, human greed, and the coldness we show each other when blinded by money, which is a success worth acknowledging for now. There are fewer games, supporting characters are left behind, and nothing more is revealed about the mysterious organization. That's exactly the feeling that Squid Game Season 2 brings. So after all that time spent focusing on Gi-hun's psychology, did our hero achieve any kind of breakthrough development? Sadly, the answer is also no. And for me personally, Gi-hun is the most disappointing character. First of all, it's obvious to any viewer that he didn't really learn much from his previous win. He had 46 billion won in his hands, which is roughly 700 billion Vietnamese dong. It's hard to believe that Gi-hun didn't hire professional hunters, but instead chose to invest his money in a bunch of debt collectors, searching around the train station every day. On top of that, he trusted them for 2 whole years. His plan to assassinate the masked leader on Halloween night was also extremely sloppy. And even Gi-hun returning to the game was just because the boss found it interesting. Then, once he got to the island, Gi-hun was completely lost, even though he performed really well in the red light, green light game by saving nearly 400 people. But starting from the second game, Gi-hun was like a completely different person. He had no voice, didn't know the rules. On top of that, he even got tricked by number 1 in exactly the same way old man Oh-il Nam deceived him back then. Especially, the plan in the final episode really made me question this character's naivety. He called for a rebellion when he barely had any support. It's unclear why Gi-hun was so confident he could defeat the Triangle masked guards, when he himself had seen how aggressive they were. Not only that, the reasons his teammates swore to risk their lives alongside him weren't all that convincing either. To me, the plan in the final episode is pretty contradictory to what Gi-hun kept saying throughout the series, which was to get the players back home. Why, when he had the upper hand on the X side, didn't he team up with the other X-choosers to defend themselves, so that the next morning they could escape the island and join forces with Officer Juno outside, where guns and ammunition were already prepared and waiting? Or, even more simply, why not use his huge amount of money to bribe the blue team into changing their minds? Why sacrifice the lives of other players for a spur-of-the-moment plan that has a 90% chance of failing? When I watch Squid Game, I try not to pay too much attention to the plot holes, because even the first season had them. But when I see players who, just a few minutes earlier, had the chance to walk away with over 300 million won in cash, now willingly give it all up to follow Gi-hun straight into danger, the absurdity just becomes too much. After 3 years of preparation, having enough money to buy everything he needed, and a full 2 hours to plan, Gi-hun ultimately only changed his sullen expression and wasted everything he had on a hasty showdown whose outcome every viewer could already predict. On the outside, police officer Juno and his elite team still haven't had a chance to show what they can do. After 7 episodes, he hasn't made any significant progress except for joining forces with Gi-hun, and there's a good chance he'll continue to be manipulated by that organization. And finally, there's something I want to mention, the atmosphere the show creates. It weaves in quite a lot of humorous details. Personally, I feel that sometimes the tension gets diluted unnecessarily. The most obvious example is the character Woo-suk. After going through a life-or-death round of Russian roulette, it's hard to understand how he still manages to keep his playful personality, always joking around and being the main comic relief of the series. There are quite a few jokes like that during the games as well. I'm not saying they're not funny, but the fact that the characters sometimes joke around while being trapped on a strange deserted island and could die at any moment feels a bit unrealistic. Speaking of humor, I have to admit that Gi-hun's twisted face in the first episode when he got the umbrella-shaped candy looked really hilarious. But that was a bitter, somewhat tragic kind of laughter. This time, as I mentioned, it dilutes the tension that Squid Game really needs. Overall, I personally feel quite disappointed with Squid Game's return. Even though it still maintains its grand scale and aesthetics, there are a lot of issues with the story, the characters, and their psychological development. It's unclear whether the third season will be able to address these gaps, but if they want to bring the series back, a change is probably needed right now. As for what I'm seeing, Squid Game Season 2 feels more like a trailer for Season 3. It starts off slow and ends abruptly. And that's our overall impression of Squid Game's second season. Do you agree with the show? Leave a comment below so we can discuss it together. We'll wrap up this video here. Goodbye, and enjoy watching the show.
May the force be with you.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Play as time goes by.
Have a view, Davy.